What's good? It's Wood. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are into the fight talk. We have a boxing exhibition between Floyd Mayweather, who had a professional record of 50 wins and 0 losses, taking on Logan Paul with a boxing record of 0-1. And this 6-round boxing exhibition is taking place June 6th. Now, in terms of these non-professional official fights, like this isn't a professional boxing match, it's not a mixed martial arts match, so everything that is not that is usually either considered like a circus fight, a celebrity fight, what have you. I do think that within that realm there are varying degrees of competitive matchmaking, or at least interesting matchmaking, and I think that this Floyd Mayweather versus Logan Paul exhibition, I don't know if it's going to be competitive. I don't know if Floyd's going to just go in there and smoke him out in the first round like he did 125-pounder Tenshin Nasukawa a couple of years ago in Japan. Another exhibition, 3-rounder. Because Logan Paul being required to come in at a minimum weight of 190 pounds, whereas Floyd Mayweather has to come in at 160 and below, that size differential in itself at least makes it interesting. Now, you couple that with the age component. Floyd is now 44 years old, and, he is as good as you will ever see in that mid to late 30s range. I mean, we know that Manny Pacquiao is somehow competing at an elite professional boxing level right now at 42. He's about to take on one of the pound-for-pound best in the sport, Errol Spence. Well, Floyd retired at like 35, 36. His last professional fight, even though they consider that 2017 fight against Conor McGregor a professional fight, that was his 50th win technically. His last professional fight against an actual boxer took place in like 2016 or 15 versus Andre Berto, a very quality near elite fighter. And Floyd obviously had one of the most tremendous careers ever in any weight class in those 18 years prior to that retirement. Now, everybody has a bone to pick with any great you can name. I mean, look, Floyd Mayweather right now, people will say, oh, he ducked Antonio Margarito in a place and time. Like, I know Shane Mosley ended up finishing Margarito and Manny Pacquiao ended up beating the hell out of Margarito. But when we talk about these, he should have fought, these are a lot of conversations that we were having when we saw the surging Miguel Cotto coming up from 140 saying, oh, damn, this is who I would really like to see the great Floyd Mayweather fight right now. And yes, Floyd did fight Miguel Cotto, albeit a couple years later, or a few years later, depending on which Miguel Cotto you wanted to see paired up versus Floyd. But obviously there was, Floyd versus Pacquiao. It didn't happen when we really wanted it to happen. You could say that Floyd versus Shane Mosley happened a little too late. Floyd never fought, Paul Williams when Paul Williams was looking like a super dangerous guy, especially at 147. Unusually crazy dimensions. I mean, we're talking like Thomas the Hitman Hearns type height and reach. Now, Paul Williams didn't have his power, but the volume that Paul Williams was displaying at the time was looking like a super interesting matchmaking dilemma for Floyd. Same thing with when Amir Khan was showing elite performance levels and potentials, when he was whooping up on Devin Alexander, who was a very quality fighter himself. Look, all of this is to say, people had their gripes about, the matchmaking of Floyd, but I will challenge you to find another fighter who, fight by fight over the course of their career, has a more impressive resume than Floyd Mayweather, especially in the modern era. There are only a couple people you could even have that conversation about. Oscar De La Hoya, who, was down to fight anybody. Manny Pacquiao and maybe Canelo Alvarez is starting to emerge into that discussion, but no, he still falls short of Floyd Mayweather's career resume at this point. But Canelo, we all know, is still working. So that story is still being written. But doesn't a little bit of the criticism that you've heard about Floyd sound like what you're hearing about Canelo today? People want to see him fight like Jermall Charlo right now, or David Benavidez right now, or go up to 175 and fight the greatest of light heavyweights, Artur Beterbiev or Dmitry Bivol. Well, look, I'm not going to do a total review of Floyd's entire career. All I'm saying is these are discussions that are had and we can have in subsequent videos. Right now, I just want to look at this Floyd Mayweather versus Logan Paul fight in a vacuum. At the end of the day, we have a 44-year-old welterweight, basically, against a 26-year-old non-professional big dude who is at least a serviceable athlete. He wrestled and played some football in high school. I mean, look, there are levels to this stuff, right? Athleticism wise. All I'm saying is, just by everyday people standards, Logan Paul is not a scrub. His brother Jake Paul certainly not a scrub, right? Look, I think that this is the lesser of the two Paul brothers in terms of boxing, which, might open up huge potentials if Floyd, mops the floor with Logan Paul, or if he has some difficulty with Logan Paul. It obviously lines right up with Floyd Mayweather versus Jake Paul. I think that that's the Super Bowl that they are angling at right now, especially when you look at the move that Jake Paul just made, breaking away from Triller, just signed with Showtime, and now it's been announced that he's going to be fighting great wrestling, but striking heavy mixed martial arts, former UFC welterweight champ, welterweight 170 in the UFC, Tyron Woodley, who, unlike Ben Askren, is a devastating striker. Well past his prime. We saw that 4-fight losing streak in the UFC before the UFC dropped him. But Jake Paul versus Tyron Woodley, another quality circus fight, if you will. So you see how these things are lining up. But yeah, unlike Jake Paul, who's 3-3, having knocked out Nate Robinson, knocked out, YouTuber Anasan Gibb in his first fight, and then knocked out former UFC fighter Ben Askren, former Bellator champ, former One Organization champion Ben Askren. But a Ben Askren who, again, wasn't a striker in his mixed martial arts days. Clearly a wrestler who would do everything he could do to make this fight a wrestling match, and is just a fish out of water if it's just a striking game. And we saw that as he took on and got knocked out by Jake Paul, right? So we've got Floyd against a lesser Paul brother, still a big kid, still an athlete by, some standards. He doesn't appear to be physically inept, although he, again, lost his only professional boxer against a YouTuber who himself looks like at least a serviceable athlete by regular people standards, apparently, in KSI. So, when I was first thinking about this, I was thinking, okay, if Logan Paul wants that maybe a shot in the dark chance at winning here, he needs to just run up to Floyd and beat him like if Floyd was an old man or something. You know what I'm saying? Like, just beat on him. Just beat on him, rough him up, put your body weight all over that 40-something-year-old, make the ref have to pry you off of him. I mean, risk disqualification because you are so physical with the guy. Look, you only have two arms, and Floyd is a master at knowing how these two things are going to come at him. He's seen about every pattern in the book, every punch pattern you can think of, every punch angle, from Shane Mosley's right hand to Marcos Maidana's looping overhand heat seeker missile right hand. He has seen so many different styles and variations, and has sparred with even more people who we never saw because it was behind the scenes. So if a boxing fight breaks out here, Floyd Mayweather is going to win this thing hands down. You almost have to just catch him with because Floyd Mayweather likes to spend the first round kind of getting the lay of the land and then making quick adjustments. And then by the time it's the third round, fourth round, he's figured you out and he's starting to turn the tide. He's in control, and it's basically cruise control for him from that point on. That's whether you're talking Ricky Hatton, whether you're talking the young Canelo Alvarez when they fought. He did have his stumbles. Maidana gave him a lot of problems in that first fight. Jose Luis Castillo famously gave Floyd Mayweather a lot of problems in their first fight. A lot of people thought that Castillo won that fight. And, Floyd's been hurt. He got hurt by DeMarcus Chop Chop Corley earlier in his career. Got rocked a bit by Zab Judah. Some think that should have been scored a knockdown. I thought, Marcos Maidana buzzed him at the end of one of the rounds, where you saw Floyd Mayweather a little stiff-legged walking back to the corner, kind of like Devin Haney was in this last fight last weekend against Jorge Linares. But Floyd Mayweather, when he got rocked by Maidana at the end of the round, he was basically already in the corner, so he just had to take 1 or 2 steps to the stool, whereas that Devin Haney walk to the corner looked like he was walking a mile because he was kind of clumsy, sluggish-footed, leaning forward with a smile on his face, and everybody in the house knew, yeah, he got hurt. So it's not like Floyd's been totally invincible. He's just been about as invincible as we've ever seen somebody fighting at his level for that long. 50-0 official record. But even with that experience, there is biology, and the biology and the aging process of the human being, right? Floyd Mayweather didn't look like Floyd Mayweather to me in that 2017 super fight versus Conor McGregor. You know, there are different school of thoughts in terms of whether Floyd was even taking that fight seriously or whether he carried Conor for several rounds. I'm not going to venture to guess what was actually taking place in that fight. I can only tell you what my eyes saw, okay? And I did see Floyd throw a couple punches that he might have thought was going to land, and I saw Conor actually do a pull counter uppercut and land it on Floyd. I also thought I saw Floyd get kind of hurt to the body at the end of either the 6th or 7th, 8th rounds. It was maybe 6th or 7th round. Towards the end of the round, he got hit to the body to where he kind of doubled back and kind of into the turnbuckle, you know, moved away from the action in a way that I wasn't used to seeing Floyd do. Again, I don't know if he was just acting or if Floyd isn't and wasn't Floyd, the Floyd that we're used to seeing. And if your game is to swim without getting wet, how is that going to pair up against somebody who, if nothing else, can injure you? If Logan Paul can't hit Floyd in the middle of the ring, which I don't really think he can, he shouldn't be able to even at this diminished stage, which I'm theorizing here, I think that 44-year-old Floyd is a bit diminished reflex-wise, speed-wise, you know, and look, he had hand injuries throughout his career to begin with. You know, what if they get locked up in a clinch and Logan Paul kind of yanks on him and pulls his shoulder out or something? I'm just saying that with a 44-year-old body, there are a lot of things that could go wrong when you're fighting a damn near 200-pounder. Now, Floyd is as experienced as it comes. So whether it's a boxing fight that breaks out or a battle of attrition, Floyd has had to dig deep enough throughout his career to where if shit gets really real and it gets ugly and plan A, B, C, D don't work and they end up in the trenches with each other, I think Floyd has shown the grit, not only through his performance in the ring, but you have to understand, the only reason he was able to perform like that in the ring is because he has been so dedicated in a martial arts, monk-like way, dedication to the craft to where he is all in, locked in, and he knows what winning takes. He's one of the greatest winners in boxing history. And that in itself is something when you just flat out know what you're going to need to do to win the fight. And whether this ends up being an easy ride for Floyd or he has to pull into some of those intangibles where, no, I'm not looking pretty against this guy. No, it's not a fight that I'm not having any difficulty with. This guy is roughing me up a bit and he is kind of either just swinging and beating to my body or in the clinches trying to kind of rabbit punch and do anything that Logan Paul can do to make this uncomfortable for Floyd. I mean, hell, tackle him if you're Logan Paul. Dare the ref to disqualify you. What, you're going to stop this pay-per-view event because the shit got a little rough? Okay, how's the crowd going to love that? Do anything that you can to rough up the old man, right? Because whatever you do, you cannot afford to let this develop into a boxing match, a sweet science match. So whether Floyd can conduct this fight on his terms with the space that he needs, with the approaching kind of Carlos Baldemir like approach where Floyd can pot shot him, move to the other side of the ring. Boom, boom. Clean shot, pot shot him, keep it moving and make this guy chase you and make him keep running into punches. Because that's what Floyd, I think, would like to do here, even though sometimes Floyd will also switch it up and go on his front foot and kind of walk you down. He wasn't backing up a ton against Canelo for most of that fight. Same thing with Shane Mosley. After Shane Mosley hurt him twice in that second round where he almost dropped Floyd twice. Floyd didn't back up and he clinched right in that moment, got his bearings back, but he wasn't backing up for the next several rounds. He was standing his ground coming forward. So there's a chance that you might see a lot of that in this Floyd versus Logan Paul matchup, like basically daring him to let his hands go. And then as Logan Paul throws, try to slip, try to pull counter, whatever he needs to do, or just sit on some right hand leads. Again, I don't know how many of these tools Floyd still has at his disposal. The little bit I've seen of him working out, he still looks good. He doesn't look like as good as it was when we were seeing that 24/7 footage before almost every Floyd fight before he signed the Showtime contract. And then they were doing, instead of 24, which was the HBO product, the 24/7, they were doing all access on Showtime. But you would see Floyd working the bags, working with the late Roger Mayweather and seeing them do their, drills and stuff. And you're like, yeah, this guy's like preparation is just next level. To me, jump roping Floyd, working a heavy bag Floyd, it's not looking as great as throughout Floyd's prime and even post-prime. Because, look, a lot of Floyd's most famous fights is post-prime Floyd. He'll tell you that his last 10 years of his career were post-prime in a lot of ways, just because of the wear and tear on the body. So we've got a 44-year-old, and I think that Floyd is going to be able to do enough to win the match. The question is, in this 6-rounder, what is the more likely outcome? Is it going to be Floyd by stoppage or Floyd by decision? Floyd might lose the first round here. He might even lose the second round, which then you're kind of playing with fire, because then you're almost working at a point where you're going to have to stop the guy. And so I actually don't think Floyd's going to fall behind 2 rounds on the card, but he's going to have to turn this around if there is an initial shock and, oh, damn, big guy, let's figure this out. Okay, he's holding, he's hitting. Hey, ref, you want to do something about these hits in the clinch? Like, if he's going to have to navigate that and then do something to earn Logan Paul's respect. So Logan Paul stops rushing in there. And it's not like Logan Paul was effectively rushing in, even on KSI. That's why a part of me is like, are you kidding me? Why are we even talking about this? But is Floyd going to put his foot on the gas and make the ref stop the fight or knock Logan Paul out? Is it going to get uncompetitive to the point where there's just one-way traffic with the punches being landed at a certain point? I think it's going to get to that point. I just don't know whether that's the second round, fourth round, or first round. I don't know where that's going to come. But I think that it's going to become harder and harder after the first round for Logan Paul to really lay a glove on Floyd. He's going to have to only roughhouse and cheat to get his beyond, I believe, the first round. Now, it took longer for Floyd to adjust on Conor and take control of that fight. Took longer than I expected. Again, I don't know what's real and what's not in some of these cases, right? But I figure that even a few years later, that Floyd is going to, even if 44-year-old Floyd, not 40-year-old Floyd, 44-year-old Floyd is going to figure Logan Paul out quicker than 40-year-old figured Conor McGregor out. And he's going to have to, because again, it's a 6-rounder. You could lose this thing on the cards. So the question is, do they stop the fight? I think that it can get to a point where they eventually have to stop the fight. Not necessarily. I think he's going to drop Logan Paul at a certain point. How does Logan Paul handle these trench warfare situations where the shit is not going well? He doesn't have experience. And, and because Floyd has so much experience, I think Floyd's going to be very aware of the clock. And as long as Floyd's able to survive whatever element of surprise or roughhousing or just physical, I'm going to try to beat the hell out of you because I'm bigger than you, tactics Logan Paul can employ. Because look, if Logan Paul tries to sweet science this, again, if Logan Paul tries to pull counter Floyd, I don't think that that's going to work. I might be surprised because, again, I don't know what state Floyd's in, but I don't think that's going to happen. I think that this is going to be a late stoppage for Floyd. We're talking maybe 4th, 5th round where it gets non-competitive. And you know what? Even if it gets non-competitive, I think that Floyd might still allow Logan Paul to survive the 6 rounds if Logan Paul doesn't press the issue, starts moving around, and basically starts saying, hey, you've beaten me, Floyd. I won't push the issue if you don't. The way that, I don't know, Robert the Ghost Guerrero or Andre Berto ended up doing with Floyd. Floyd won't press the issue in the same way that, you know, Manny Pacquiao would. Like, there's nowhere to run, nowhere to hide against Manny Pacquiao, right? So, you know, Logan might go the distance. He's a big dude, maybe bigger neck, more punch resilience, even though it's not like Logan Paul's been making a living taking punches from any professional fighter. So we don't know. Maybe when shit gets like real, Logan Paul will just totally freak out and, you know, totally buckle, hit the canvas, you know, not have his wits about him, and Floyd just like puts a few more punches to him and the ref says, hey, that's enough. Maybe we get that situation if Logan Paul's not built for this yet. It's a possibility. I'm going to go with Floyd, late stoppage. Yeah, but let me know what you think in the comments. Are you offended that we're even having this circus fight conversation? And what does this mean for Showtime Boxing? What does this mean for boxing in general? Does it mean anything at all? Or is it just a novelty that, you know, during the pandemic and afterwards is just very faddy, F-A-D, fad, and will it go away in a couple years, you know? But yeah, please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you're into the fight talk. Is this a dangerous fight? Of course it is, right? I mean, in a sense, just because of what's at stake. I know it's not going to go on his professional record, but Floyd has always, you know, or maybe not always, but at least in that second half of his career where he was breaking every boxing money-making commercial record that you could break, when he was in that mode of his career, Money Mayweather stage, De La Hoya and beyond, you know, that O in his record meant something. And although he would retain it here officially, I mean, so many people pay money to see Floyd potentially get beaten up to where a loss here, even in an exhibition, means a ton. So, yeah, if you're Team Floyd, you don't want Floyd to lose this. But yeah, I'm looking forward to it. But let me know your thoughts. Thanks again for tuning in.